ready?
We're ready.
So it is set up as a Baroque right now, meaning that the neck is shorter. Instead of 128 millimeters, it's around 120, maybe 118 from the front of the nut. This piece right here where the strings go through is called the nut. From there to the edge of the body will not be 128 millimeters. It's shorter than that. It also has a Baroque fingerboard. That is, it is a lamination of wood over another piece of wood. It's clad wood. And you can see that it is separated here as the top is starting to undo, and that's actually very common. So if you look, you'll see that that's a separate piece of wood.
Oh, yeah.
It could be rosewood, it could be ebony, over maple.
Very cool.
So this was originally a Baroque violin. It would have had gut strings on it originally.
And what does Baroque mean?
Baroque is simply the time era. Vivaldi, the other people. I'm trying to make sure you don't have a bow here. So this is just an inexpensive student bow that someone put stripes on to make it look like snake wood.
Okay.
And that's very common. Now, what you have here is you have a Baroque tailpiece. It's Baroque, not broke, but Baroque,
Right.
because it has the two eyes, and then each of them are relieved.
I saw that and I couldn't figure that out at
Okay.
all.
But it's not an early Baroque,
Okay.
because early Baroque would not have these catgut going through it. There would be two holes drilled, and it would be vertically going through it.
Okay.
So this has been upgraded sometime in the past. Now that I can look into the end of it, I will give you a little bit of what we talked about earlier. The arching, where it gradually rises and then goes down, is typical Saxon arching. It could also be Bohemian. The exact same thing occurs on the bottom. If it was Italian, this would rise up quickly, flatten out, and then go back down. Now there are also some Germans who did that, especially Mittenwald, where they went to Italy and trained. Now I need to look through here. It has a one-piece neck and block.
Need a flashlight or something like that?
That would be great if you
Yeah.
have one. So when you look at this, this is a single piece, including what is inside the body. That is standard fare. And that was used even in Italy in the 16 and 1700s. Thank you. And when I look through here, you can see that the wood block is the typical rectangle. If you look inside, you'll see the rectangle at the end that gets slightly wider at the top.
Oh, yeah.
Okay? And that means that the neck is all one piece. That piece you see is part of this. And what they did is they basically carved it, and then they fit the ribs into it, and then used a couple of shaped pieces of wood to clamp it in place and then glue it. So that's why this is held in there. It's also Baroque because when you look, this projection angle does not rise up to where you could put a modern 28 to 30 millimeter bridge on there. So it would have to be reset, but you would not do that. This would be played as a Baroque instrument. So they would, a new Baroque fingerboard would be carved for it. These holes would be filled. Other than the holes that were put into it, this neck, I don't see any cracks. And that's a very, very good sign. It was not grafted. I don't see a sign of it being grafted. Doesn't appear to have been bushed, which is what you were talking about it needing. And bushings are standard. I've had some violins They've been bushed 2 or 3 times. The F holes are kind of an unusual. If you notice, they're not the same.
Oh, I didn't.
Look real close. This is definitely longer, farther down here, and slightly higher, and this is slightly shorter and goes more in. So this is more of a Stradivarius type. It's not a copy of a Stradivarius. It's a Stradivari type, but it has the center arching more of a Steiner. So this was meant to be ordered as a Steiner. It would have had a Steiner label in it that they got out of a book and just glued it in. And it would have been part of a dozen sold. They always sold them in lots of a dozen.
Oh.
So, yeah, when you ordered them, you always got 12 at a time as a distributor. And then when someone bought it, they would put whatever. I'm looking for a Steiner. Oh, we have a Steiner. Let me go get it. Take the label out, glue it in there. Here's your Steiner.
Oh, I
and
see.
that's what they did.
Right.
Same exact violin. Now, the varnish is original on this, which is really good. It's had a sound post crack on the top here, and the repair is substandard. But we're not talking a $20,000 instrument. We're talking, if you sell it for the $500 that you legitimately should get for this.
Okay.
Someone is going to take this, they're going to simply remove the top. Let me see if the top has been removed in the past. Yeah, top's been off in the past. Oh, it looks like only one time, because there's still, you can see like there's a little bit of glue residue right there. There's some glue residue right in here. But it has not been off numerous times. It looks like it's only been off maybe once. So this seam needs to be repaired. That's where the 2 halves. And then that crack right there, it needs to have a patch put on the inside of it, under the foot of the bridge.
How much would something like that be?
It depends on what your purpose of the violin is going to be. This should not be a wall hanger. This thing will sound phenomenal.
Oh, really?
Oh, phenomenal. It's exactly where I said it was. It's a 3. It's a better student grade or a very entry-level professional. Either one of those could play it. The carving, the edge work, the purfling is all good quality. That's the inlaid wood along the 3 pieces. Very well done. In other words, this was not their entry-level stuff.
Okay.
So let me just borrow that for a second. I want to see if
I
it
saw
has
in
anything.
I saw in an old 1900 something Sears catalog, like early 1900s, that they had the student violins that had the different grades to them.
Yep.
Beginner, intermediate.
Yep. I'm trying to see if there's any stamps. Usually Hopf would have had some kind of a stamp. All right, so the top is carved. The bass bar is part of the top, which was everything on this is Klingenthal.
Okay.
And it's original. That means it hasn't been tinkered with, which to a restorer, that's what they're looking for. So it's basically not as rough as you think. It simply needs a restoration. Now, fiddle players love these, really love them, and they actually like the mechanical tuners, because the mechanical tuners give them an easier time tuning them than pegs. Pegs are problematic. They need to constantly be cleaned and have compound put on them so they turn smoothly. And,
Right.
and professionals
I
trying
remember
to tune
it
like
so
this.
well. Yeah, remember trying
So,
to keep it tuned.
But there's no seams That crack has been glued poorly. That crack has been glued poorly. If you look, there should not be a step there.
Right.
But let me just tap it to see what kind of tone this would have. All right, so the back appears to be tuned. They were all on the same frequency. Notice those were different. Now that can be from the repair. You don't know until you actually put it back to its original shape. But so the top would need, if someone was going to bother to restore it as a player, this will never be a collector's item because they produced millions of these. The United States, prior to our Civil War, every family had one, virtually every family, and they almost always got them from that three-city area where you had Klingenthal slightly to the north, Marknenkirchen slightly to the south, and then Schonbach across the border in Bohemia. And those three cities produced between 80 and 90% of all violins ever produced. Millions of them a year came out of that area.
Wow.
Millions.
Wow.
Yeah, so it's
Millions back
amazing
then.
how many they produced. Now, when this one was built, no, they were not in the millions. It would have been, 100,000 out of the three. But around before the radio, so after our Civil War, but before the radio took over, you still had everybody playing violin. And you had people that what they were looking for was music. And everyone had a family member that played. Most people's father, grandfather, aunt, somebody played. And they look at it and they're, average person can't tell a real Stradivari from a similar looking thing that is supposed to be a Stradivari. This is better than many of the violins out there. Many of them are ones. Remember, I said, many of them are ones. But this would be a very good sounding instrument. This and that, to have that done properly, you've got a crack there, which is easy to close. There are actually tools that you squeeze it back together. And then I would not alter the neck angle. It's not separated. There's no looseness to it. Little bit of a crack here, which is very common where the button attaches to the body. That was, see that little tiny crack? Again, nothing to be concerned about. Overall, it goes right in line with what I would say. Now the way these were built, just make sure it doesn't have a channel. Okay, the way these were built is the top and the back were carved, but they were rough carved. They then glued the neck and the ribs to the back. They then glued the top on. Then they did the edge work. So there's not another one that will fit this exactly the same because they were rough drawn and then carved. So that's why everything is not perfect,
Right.
which gives it its personality.
Exactly.
Okay.
So when you look at an instrument like this, usually they can be awful or really, really good or anywhere in between, and you don't know until you restore it, put a set of strings on there, adjust it. 9 out of 10 times though, this era produced really good sounding instruments because the wood was freely available.
Yeah.
And you can see that the spruce on the top is not heavily real super fine like what you would find in the Alps. This would be local spruce. It's not Carpathian. There was a trade route that came through there. Klingenthal was kind of at the end of the trade route. So Martin McCurchin and Schoenbach got the better wood, and then what was left over went to them. And you can see this has some striations. These are all growth rings. But you also see that it's got a yellow underneath the brown. That was very common for Klingenthal. So to basically assess its value, completely restored, this would be a $2,500, maybe $3,000 violin.
Okay.
And that's set up as a Baroque instrument, and that's what a violin dealer would sell it for. What we could get for it, totally different. But it is still, if someone came and offered you $450, you're like, no, not taking it.
Okay.
It's, you just hold on to it. It's just going up in value. Now this violin would have been about $5, maybe $4 when it was made.
Wow.
A Stradivari would have been $500, even back then. It's hard to believe, but I have catalogs from 1860, 1850, and dirt cheap violins were $1.10.
Yeah, I saw some of that in the Sears catalog.
catalogs.
Do you believe the date inside of it, the 1802 that's
No,
written inside?
That was someone just put that in. It's got nothing to do with, it's someone's conjecture. I was trying to see if there was anything that I could find that gave me a maker. What'll happen is someone will, take it to an expert, and the expert will say, yeah, it looks like it was made about. And then you're like, so what? That's why I gave you the 1790 to about 1830.
Okay.
And that was, some of it is all based on the slightly longer peg box, the Baroque neck, the neck angle, the fact that I don't think this was made any earlier than 1800, to be honest with you. It would be very unusual, because normally this would have Steiner F-holes, very S-shaped F-holes. And these are more upright.
Okay.
And that was Stradivari. But the shape of it isn't anywhere near any Stradivari out there. So this was the standard shape, and I'll show you, because I brought a couple of them.
That's great.
So you can actually see. But again, you have an idea. It's not the bottom grade. This has linings inside it. It doesn't have corner blocks, because they never had corner blocks, the early ones.
Okay.
If they did, it was added on. And I'll show you one I have made by Caspar Hopf in 1780. And it's a $20,000 instrument.
Oh, okay.
Same family, but it's also up there in the artist grade. And you'll see the difference. The edge work, if you look here, you'll see that the edge kind of smoothly comes up and then around. Notice there's no sharp upward carving at the purfling. And you'll see that on the one that I have, that I'll show you a couple of them that I have, you'll see the difference. And that will give you an indication of what you have. But this should be a really, really good sounding instrument. Do you have a tape measure by any chance?
Yeah.
That will also tell me, generally they were about 14 1/8 of an inch by about 1820.
Do you need something
That's
metric
it's
on
right
it?
over
No,
14.
no, that's all that I need.
Yep. It is right over 14.
All right, if it's under 14, that makes it older. This is really just like 355 millimeter rather than 356. All right, so that's gonna put it exactly where I thought. After 1800, 1810, 1803, there could have been a label in there that someone put their name on it, and then it fell out or it got lost, and someone put 1803 in it.
Yeah, 1802.
So the date could be very accurate.
Okay.
But It doesn't have any worm tracks that I see. It appears to be the original varnish. It's been over varnished, probably French polished. Now, you see right here in the reflection how you see a noticeable upward bump right where the purfling is.
Mm-hmm.
You see what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
Do you?
Okay, I do.
Christine?
I do.
All right. That would be even more pronounced, and that would make it a more expensive violin because it's so much more work to do that than to just have a slight slight rise on it. I'm gonna go get a couple so that you can
Okay.
you can see.
All right.